Welcome back to Fashion Shirts. Today I'm going to be doing my review of Williams' 2024 F1 season. So, like the Sauber video I did yesterday, today we'll be starting out with the driver head-to-head. So, of course, for Williams, they had three drivers this year: Alex Albon, Franco Colapinto, and Logan Sargent. So, I'm going to be doing the driver head-to-head stats comparison separately, of course, for the two pairs of drivers. So, of course, chronologically, we'll be doing this in order. So that means, of course, starting with Albon and Sargent. So let's see if we can get this going. There we go. So Albon, Sargent, qualifying stats, not great. If you're Sargent, Albon won all 12 qualifying head-to-heads where both drivers participated. Median qualifying gap, 0.304 seconds in Albon's favor. A little bit closer than last year, Sargent's rookie season, but still not really good enough, I would say. Average starting position as well, 13.33 for Albon, Sargent 17.57. Again, this is just for their time as teammates together. Average finishing position for Albon 13.17, and for Sargent 16.75. So Sargent barely improving from his starting position. So again, average finishing position difference between the two drivers over 3 positions, which is really too big in modern F1. Now, when you look at the race stats, again, for some of these, for Albon, it's his full season stats just because it was much easier to just keep the full season stats. And again, I'll tell you which ones are which. But of course, for Albon, 16th in the championship in the end, Sargent only 23rd with, of course, no points. Race head-to-head with both drivers finished. That's 10-0 in Albon's favor. So again, wasn't able to finish ahead of Albon when both drivers finished. And for points, it was 4-0 in Albon's favor. For points above expected, percentage, and average power rankings, this is the season total. For Albon, this will be these are the same stats that we'll see for when we compare to Colapinto. But for Albon, 4.64 points above expected. When you look at that as a percentage, 163%. So that's above 100. So that's a good thing. Average power ranking for Albon 12.00, which funnily enough ranks 12th on this year's grid. For Sargent, average points above expected, negative 1.2, and again, converted into a percentage, that's a 0, so not very good there. For Sargent, average power rankings for this year was an 18.07, which ranked 22nd and last amongst all the full-time drivers. So basically, removing Behrman, removing Doohan from that list. Now, yes, okay, so when you compare Albon and Sargent, their 2 years as teammates together, compare them for both the race model and for qualifying. Again, I'm just using the raw qualifying statistics because I think it's a lot more clearer. For the race model 2023, the race score was a 3, basically a 3 in Albon's favor. And again, this past season, it basically went down to just below, a hair below. Actually, no, I might be reading that wrong. I think it was so it was almost 4 last year, and this year is, I think, just above 3. So a small improvement, but not really enough that I think would warrant keeping Sargent around any further. If the gap had shrunk to about, let's say, a 1 or a 2 in my race model, I think perhaps the team would have considered keeping him around for a 3rd season. Median qualifying gap, it did improve, and it did improve in by a pretty big margin. Their first season together, 2023, I think the qualifying gap was about half a second or so. Again, that gap decreased to 0.3 of a second, so about 0.2 improvement, which again is still positive. But again, I don't think it was really big enough. And I think for me, when I think why Sargent was, of course, dropped mid-season, I think there's a couple of things. One, in the races, there was just there's almost no improvement from Sargent. Like you can see with the blue line, it does improve a little bit, but basically almost nothing. Qualifying does improve, and I don't think that was a big issue. Again, would have been nice to see Sargent actually outqualify Albon from time to time. But I think the other big thing that was really killing them was the fact that Sargent was crashing so much, and it was his crash at the Dutch Grand Prix that I think is really what prompted Valve to make that decision, pull the trigger, and drop Sargent early. And of course, that brought in Franco Colapinto, who of course was doing Formula 2 earlier in the season, and he is of course parachuted into Williams for the final 9 races of the season. So again, I talked about this in my video talking about Colapinto about like a month ago, but I basically looked at other situations where a rookie's basically been parachuted in mid-season as a replacement. And again, I thought that Colapinto had fared very, very well compared to past historical examples. And again, I still think that now. Now that the season's gotten done, he did kind of, for Colapinto, he did kind of end the season on a little bit of a low. Again, I think the car he was driving for the last two races was basically a Franken car, so I don't think it was the same spec of car as Albon's, which again will explain some of the gap. But at the same time, he did have some big crashes in Vegas, crashed twice in Brazil as well. So I can understand, why there'd be a bit of trepidation around Colapinto after his first, mid-season, or his first half season, I would say. So taking a look at the race head-to-head stats, qualifying, Albon had the advantage there, 7-2, but the median qualifying gap was very, very small, less than a tenth of a second, being 0.091 seconds. And again, given that Colapinto was basically parachuted in mid-season, no testing, anything of that nature, I think very, very impressive from Colapinto there. I think if you put them together over the course of a season, again, you gave Colapinto basically a year to kind of embed himself, I think Colapinto would end up being the faster driver of the two. And that's just my personal opinion. And again, it's something that we'll kind of have to wait and see how that shakes out. It could be that this is the last we've seen of Colapinto in F1. I really hope it isn't. I'd really like to see him on the grid again in the future. But again, you never really know with how things are in F1. In terms of average starting position, average finishing position, Albon definitely better stats there, although not necessarily the case for finishing position. Average starting position, Albon 12.88, for Colapinto 16.11. And for average finishing position, Colapinto actually had the better stats here. 11.60 for Albon compared to 11.17 for Colapinto. So interesting to see that he actually had the better stats there. So again, interesting in that respect. When you look at more stats, like the race stats, for championship position, Albon of course finished 16th. I said that before, but for Colapinto he finished 9th. He got 5 points compared to Albon's 8th during their time as teammates together. And the race head-to-head where both drivers finished, despite the fact that they had 9 races together as teammates, there was only 3 races. I kid you not, 3 races out of 9 where both of them finished. So again, it really highlights Williams' struggles and basically both drivers' propensity to crash or not finish races. And of course, Albon had the advantage there 2-1. So, but again, very, very small sample size, so not really representative, I think. When you look at points above expected, percentage and average power rankings, I've already gone over Albon's, but for Colapinto, he was 3.49 points above expected with a percentage of 330. So again, pretty good there. Average power rankings for Colapinto, 13.78, which does rank 19th. If I had done this before the final triple header of the season, Colapinto's average would have been much, much higher, but unfortunately those last 3 races were not fantastic, and that definitely brought his average down quite a bit. Let's see. So taking a look at some of Williams' team stats for the season, 17 points over the year, that ranks 9th. Average pole gap, 1.233 seconds, again ranks 9th. And average minimum finishing position, 12.08, which ranks 9th. So again, kind of makes sense. Over the course of the whole season, they were generally the 9th best team, both qualifying and the races. So again, I don't think they'll be too upset, not like the 2 teams above them, who I do think will have some reason to think that they've been a bit hard done by in terms of their overall constructors ranking. Now, when you look at Williams in qualifying over the course of the season, they started out pretty well. I believe, let's see, which line are they? Oh, they're the light blue line. Yeah, so at the start of the season, they were about a second off pole. So again, not too far off the RB, a little bit off the pace of the Haas, but again, much better than Sauber and much better than Alpine. And then I think I'm going to just look over here because it's a little bit easier for me to see. There was a brief, so I'm just checking. Yeah, so there's a brief spell during the middle of the season where they were actually the slowest team in terms of three-ways average. And that was, again, towards the middle of the season where, Sauber had a bit of a brief resurgence. But then after that, towards the second half of the season, they were generally trending towards the lower end of that kind of bottom 5-team pack. And again, by the end of the season, they were kind of well off the pace of the Alpine, the Haas, and the RB over 1 lap. So a little bit of a disappointing end to the season. I think that being said, though, for Williams, they really exceeded expectations last year. And again, James Vowles coming into the season was really talking about how, we kind of were a lot better last year than we thought we were going to be, and we kind of have to temper expectations for 2025 or for 2024. So this is kind of, I think, the season that they expected to have last year. And again, they're kind of building slowly towards potentially being a much better team in 2026. For 2025, again, if things go right, perhaps they can lead that bottom 5 group of teams. So perhaps finishing 6th in the championship would probably be the best case scenario for them next year. And I do think that they'll have a pretty strong lineup to do. And, that driver lineup of Sainz and Albon, should be good enough if the car is capable. When you look at Williams, just kind of finishing up these last 2 graphs, for Williams, when you look at them quarter by quarter, first quarter of the season, average finishing position was about 15 for the first and second quarter. Third quarter of the season turned out to be their best, whereas average minimum finishing position was, average finishing position was about 12. And then again, last quarter of the season, it did drop off a little bit there. When you look at points, similar situation again, it does map pretty closely with the average finishing position. First quarter of the season, I believe, no points. Second quarter, they got 5 points, or 4 to 5 points, I believe. Third quarter of the season, they got 10, I think 10 to 12 about or so. And then final quarter of the season, again, I think 1 to 2 points. So not a great finish to the season. And again, that's something that they're going to want to work on, having that consistency over the course of the season. Now, when you look at Williams's long-term trend since 2020 for average starting position and for average finishing position, you can see that they've generally been trending in the right direction since 2020. Of course, if I'd included one more year in this graph, if I'd included 2019, that was, of course, probably the worst year potentially in their team's entire history. Again, you would again see that positive trend. But again, you can see from 2020 where average starting position, average finishing position was about 13th, 16th. And again, it's generally improved over those 5 years. And again, qualifying performance has also improved quite a bit from compared to 2022, for example, where you can see the blue line is quite a bit above the red line. So again, a bit of a gap there in qualifying performance. And again, like I mentioned before, 2023 to 2024, again, you can see there's a bit of a drop in performance in both race and qualifying. So a little bit of a drop in performance there, but it's not a massive dramatic drop like we'll see with some of the other teams a bit later on. So again, I think for Williams, I think 2024 was about where they expected to be. Again, they probably were hoping for a few less crashes, but that being said, I think the fact that they were able to get such a high quality driver in Sainz to sign for them for 2025, I think is a really big deal. I think he's going to be a fantastic addition for the team, both purely from a driving perspective and also in terms of just feedback and also kind of work culture and saying, these are the things that we need to do in order to be, a top team again. So again, I think I'm pretty excited to see what the team can do in 2025. I think they're going to have 2 very capable drivers. And if the car is capable, I think they should be, able to fight for best of the rest in the Constructors' Championship. So there you go. There's my review of Williams's 2024 F1 season. I think an okay season by the recent standards, but still I think a lot of room for improvement. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.